gentlemen, and welcome to part 2 of Smacking Objectivism. Laxicity. Okay. Now, objection number 2. Thus, many of my libertarian friends also insisted that everybody is always totally selfish. The claim, often asserted even by many who are not libertarians, is that no person ever does anything except that which was in their own self-interest. For any example anyone cares to throw out, their answer with a selfish interpretation. The person who gives to charity does so only so that others will think well of them. Those who give anonymously do so for the pleasure of giving. The soldier who throws himself on a grenade in order to save his buddies did so because he wanted his buddies to think favorably of him, or because he would not be able to live with the pain of their deaths. Psychological egoism, which is what this view is called, is not a necessary part of libertarianism. However, the two are frequent traveling companions that are thought to mutually support each other. Psychological egoism, however, cannot lend any support to libertarianism because it is false. Yes, it is. If we put this view in terms of the value train discussed in the previous clip, it states that the engine for all value trains is the pleasure, happiness, well-being, or self-interest of the agent. There are different versions of psychological egoism for different possible engines. However, all of these theories share the trait that the engine is always intimately concerned with the agent. One logical oddity with this way of thinking looked to the fact that my Randian friends also promoted what was called the virtue of selfishness. Being self-interested is, on this view, not only a psychological compulsion, but a duty, the cornerstone of ethical behavior. How can selfishness be a virtue if no person could ever be anything but totally selfish? What sense does it make to give arguments saying that nobody should do anything rather than A, if nobody can do anything but A? We can start digging toward another problem with psychological egoism by asking about the sources of this pleasure for the person who gives to charity. For example, why would the truly selfish person feel any pleasure at giving to charity? Why would he feel pain at the loss of his battlefield friends, other than perhaps the same loss that he would feel if his gun got destroyed, or he misplaced his body armor, or some other useful tool? Clearly, the loss of a useful tool does not justify the sacrifice of one's own life to save it. A soldier does not jump on a grenade to prevent his body armor from being harmed. The value people put in their friends seems to be a totally different type from that which they place on mere tools. The claim that everybody is selfish seems to require a play on words, inventing a whole new definition of the word selfish. When my friends said that people always do what they want, this seems true. The person who gives to charity does so because he wants to help others. The person who jumps on a grenade to save his friends does so because he wants his friends to go on living. But selfishness means more than doing what you want. It means wanting only your own well-being. It means having no interest in helping others, and having no interest in the lives of one's friends, except to have the same type of interest in keeping them handy as useful tools. Some have argued that everybody acts for pleasure, and they only help others because of the jolts of pleasure that results. I will argue against this shortly, but let's accept it for the time being. We still have reason to distinguish those who get their jolts of pleasure from helping other people and those who get their jolts of pleasure from helping themselves. This is the distinction that the term selfish was meant to describe. those who want to call selfish those who act for the sake of a jolt of pleasure without considering how they get it, have pulled the term out of its normal context. And I'm sorry, this is true. They really have. Ultimately, I'm going to accept the claim that people always do what they want. However, they do not always want that which benefits them. This is the distinction the psychological egoist fails to recognize. They begin by claiming that people always want that which is in their own best interest. When confronted with counterexamples, they answer with explanations saying that the agents are doing what they want. They treat these two as identical. However, they are not. It's like asserting that all herbivores are cows, and when confronted with a counterexample, such as a horse, answering that by cow I mean anything that eats plants. So here's a counterexample to egoism. Assume as a parent you have been captured by a mad scientist and imprisoned in a cell from which you cannot escape. The scientist offers you two options. Option 1. Your child will live a healthy and happy life. The scientist will arrange for the child's education and health care and protect the child from harm. However, you, the parent, will be made to be totally convinced that your child is suffering a most horrendous torture. Option 2. Your child will be captured and brought into a dungeon from which there is no escape and caused to suffer the most horrendous torture. However, you will be totally convinced that your child is living a healthy and happy life. If psychological egoism were true, all parents would select option 2. There is no benefit to the agent of selecting option 1. All that is in it for the agent is the misery and agony of thinking of their child's suffering. Yet most people would claim to prefer option 1 over option 2. Of course, we are not going to actually kidnap people and force them to make this choice in order to test their hypothesis. But this question still provides a set of observations that the psychological egoist cannot explain. Psychological egoism not only has to say that rational people would select option 2, but also has to answer the question of why the average parent cannot or will not admit that when asked a hypothetical question such as this, why do so many of them give what, to the psychological egoist, is the wrong answer as to what they will do, and show every sign that they do not think it is the wrong answer. Psychological egoists have to invent a convoluted story to explain this mass self-deception. However, those who deny psychological egoism can easily answer why so many people say they would select option 1. It is because they are more interested in the welfare of the child than in their own welfare. In other words, psychological egoism is false. So this was the second objection. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, leave comments, rate, fave. You do it. Bye-bye, and I'll see you in the next clip. Ciao.